Breaking tonight, new developments in the Uranium One story. First, you remember this moment from the 2012 presidential campaign?
This is to Russia. This is, without question, our #1 geopolitical foe.
In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, the Cold War's been over for 20 years.
So as you can see, clearly back then, President Obama did not see Russia as a threat. And Russia took advantage of that in this way, by moving to gobble up as much of the existing uranium on the market, primarily from the U.S. and Canada. They did so, according to new reporting on the FBI investigation, by bribing and giving kickbacks to American contractors in order to push through the deal that they very much wanted. And they ended up with a fifth of all of the U.S. supply of the atomic material. And regardless of the FBI bribery investigation that was ongoing, ironically under the direction of Robert Mueller, now in charge of the new Russia investigation, Eric Holder and Hillary Clinton were two on the committee who signed off and said that this deal would be okay. Also, simultaneously, at this time, Bill Clinton was making millions from the Russians for speeches that he was giving that were going back to the Clinton Foundation. So there are questions that have arisen, again, on all of this, and they do need answers. And Senator Chuck Grassley was pushing for them today. Watch.
Reports suggest that the Clinton Foundation received millions of dollars from interested parties in the transaction. Bill Clinton received $500,000 for a speech in Moscow, June 2010, from the Russian government-aligned bank. The same month as the speech, Russia began the uranium acquisition process. Has the Justice Department fully investigated whether the Russians compromised the Obama administration's decisions to smooth the way for transactions, and if not, why not?
Mr. Chairman, we're working hard to maintain discipline in the department. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on any ongoing investigation.
So an ongoing investigation here with the backstory. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry joins us live from Washington. Hey, Ed.
Good evening, Martha. It turns out an FBI investigation may have found there was collusion between Russia and an American administration. It just might be the Obama administration instead of the Trump administration. So the Attorney General who might be on the griddle eventually is former Attorney General Eric Holder, whose Justice Department spent 4 years quietly probing allegations that could be damaging to Bill and Hillary Clinton. This exclusive from the Hill newspaper revealing that before the Clinton State Department okayed that controversial pact, the Uranium One deal you mentioned in 2010, that gave the Russians more than 20% of America's uranium supply. The Hill reported that federal agents, quote, obtained an eyewitness account backed by documents indicating Russian nuclear officials had routed millions of dollars to the U.S. designed to benefit former President Bill Clinton's charitable foundation during the time that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton served on a government body that provided that favorable decision to Moscow. Remember, this was all happening as Hillary Clinton was literally hitting the reset button on warmer relations with Russian President Vladimir Putin and his administration. The Uranium Pact was a sweetheart deal for Putin from then President Barack Obama, and his aides in 2010 insisted there was no national security reason for the U.S. to oppose the deal and no evidence any Russians or Clinton Foundation donors had engaged in wrongdoing. Those claims now being called into question at this hearing today, and the current Attorney General Jeff Sessions suggested he's taking a close look at that probe that started under the Obama administration. Watch.
What are you doing to find out how the Russian takeover of the American uranium was allowed to occur despite criminal conduct by the Russian company that the Obama administration approved to make the purchase?
Mr. Chairman, we will hear your concerns. The Department of Justice will take such actions as is appropriate, I know, and I would offer that some people have gone to jail in that transaction already.
In fact, we're hearing the FBI had gathered substantial evidence during the Obama administration that this man, Vadim Milkurin, the man running Putin's nuclear expansion inside America, was engaged in wrongdoing starting in 2009. You'll remember that Peter Schweitzer, author of Clinton Cash, raised some of these questions in the last campaign, and then candidate Donald Trump jumped on it. The Clinton campaign at the time insisted Hillary Clinton was not directly involved in that review you mentioned, which gave the green light to this controversial deal, though there has never been a public accounting of exactly what happened with that Justice Department probe, Martha.
Fascinating. Ed, thank you very much. So here now with more, Charles Hurt, political columnist at the Washington Times and a Fox News contributor, and Zach McCannis, a former senior DNC advisor. Gentlemen, welcome. So here we are again on this Uranium One story based on the brand new reporting, an exhaustive piece that was at The Hill, that was published on The Hill yesterday. Charlie, you know, we sort of gave this a day to kind of digest it and look it over. Now, obviously, it was the source of questions on The Hill. So this is clearly something that is back on the front burner.
And thank goodness. I mean, you know, there's a lot to investigate here, far more to investigate here than there is evidence to suggest that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. You know, what we have here, you know, who knows what the extent of the bribery was that occurred between the Russians and American officials. But, you know, clearly, paying Bill Clinton $500,000 for a speech while his wife sits on the board to make the decision to allow this deal to go through, to me, is pretty clear evidence of bribery. But and I'm so glad you played that clip from Mitt Romney and Barack Obama's debate in 2012. Still, the most shocking, stunning, amazing thing of all of this is that the previous White House agreed to give 20% of our uranium over to our greatest nuclear rival on the planet. And that is terrifying.
Zach, you know, one of the biggest questions here is why the DOJ under Eric Holder did not make sure that the committee that was overseeing the approval of this deal knew that there was a very large investigation going on. Don't you think that would have been helpful for them to have known?
Well, first off, we don't know what was told or was not. That's the nature of the letters that Grassley sent. But I think it's important that we clear up a couple of misconceptions here. Number one, I mean, yes, we do need to relook at all of the deals that we have with Russia after the Russians attacked the United States. But let's also not blow these deals out of proportion. For example, this Uranium One deal, we're talking about how it's 20% of the United States uranium production. What people are forgetting is that the Russians can't actually take the uranium outside of the United States. They don't have export permits. The uranium has to stay here in the United States. Also, the United States does not have a very big uranium production capacity, only 2% of the world nationally. We're a net importer. The reason why the Russians actually took a controlling stake in the Uranium One company, a Canadian company, because they wanted Kazakhstan uranium mines where they can export the uranium. They don't actually care about these uranium mines in the United States.
So Charlie, the argument that Zach's making is that this is just a little bit of uranium. It's really not something to worry about.
Well,
that stays here in the United States.
And this is what is so, and quite frankly, why I think Donald Trump got elected in the first place, is that the previous administration clearly did not view Russia as any kind of threat whatsoever. They got walked all over by Russia, by Vladimir Putin, and did everything that they could have possibly done. Most of it was probably stupid, as opposed to trying to stand up for him, that set up the situation where Vladimir Putin and the Russians went after our elections.
Yeah, I mean,
and
clearly,
you
know, if it was just such a tiny amount of uranium and it really wasn't consequential, Zach, you need to explain why there would have been this enormous bribery effort, these kickbacks that were given to people, and why there was so much money flowing to Bill Clinton from the Russians at the same time. And then, mysteriously, the committee that Hillary sits on to sign off on this deal says it's okay, even though there's an FBI investigation going on.
So first off, there are a couple misconceptions with there. The bribery that you're talking about involves a separate FBI case that involves a uranium trucking company.
The American trucking company.
It does nothing to do with the Uranium One sale.
It was connected. It was a North American uranium operation that had to do with trucking and transport, and then also mines in Canada. Connected.
I'm sorry, but that's simply not what is reported. What is reported is that there was a FBI investigation into a bribery scandal that involved the trucking company that concluded in 2015, where somebody went to jail. Conflating these two things is just not fair. But the other thing that I think is really important to understand here is that, yes, we do need to look at all of the Russian money that is now sloshing around here in the United States after the Russians have attacked the United States. And that begins with the millions of dollars that have gone to the RNC that the Special Counsel Mueller is looking into now.
Lots of investigating going on.
What about the millions sloshing around before the 2016 election?
I gotta go, you guys. Thank you
entire
very
thing?
much, Zach and Charlie. Good to see you both. Thanks, you guys. More to come on that. So here now to talk about the national security implications and also what happened this week with ISIS. General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. He is also a Fox News military analyst. General, good to have you here
good
tonight.
to be here, Martha.
And I do want to talk to you about ISIS and what comes next after the fall of Raqqa. But just, you listen to this conversation. What are your thoughts on the implications here?
Well, the real issue here is the nuclear power industry is actually deteriorating, and it is a strategic asset. And it's really unfortunate, and it's happening because Democratic administrations have incentivized wind and solar at the expense of nuclear, and they're just priced out in the marketplace. We used to be the #1 producer of industrial-based uranium fuel in the world. Now we've almost zeroed it out. So we take in every single year 89% of uranium fuel for our nuclear power plants, et cetera, come from foreign sources. Yeah, that's how the Russians got involved in this.
All right.
That is really the issue here. Certainly the bribery thing, it's got to be investigated. We got to find out if people have dirty hands here, to be sure.
Absolutely. We brought you here originally, and I do want to get your thoughts on ISIS because obviously it was a big week with the fall of Raqqa. So, when you play out what happens next here between Iran and between the United States and Russia, all of whom have a stake in wanting Syria to be stable in their own way of looking at that, what do you think is next?
Well, clearly, what ISIS caliphate in Iraq and Syria is largely gone. We've got to clean out where the leaders have fled to. They're in the southeastern part of Syria in the Euphrates River Valley as it runs into Iraq. So we've got to get down in there and clean all of that out. And then we come to the issue that you're talking about. And I don't think we really have a strategy here. The issue is, what about Syria after we clean out ISIS? What the Iranians fully intend to do is they have, with the support of the Russians, they have rolled up western Syria. And we're not taking that back. Assad is staying in power. There is no political procedure that will get him out of power, even though the administration desires that. That train has left the station. But eastern Syria is another thing, Martha, and the Iranians want to run the table and take over Syria completely. And after we clean out ISIS, they're moving in there with Russian support and with Syrian ground forces, but mostly with their own ground forces. The Hezbollah, by and large, are there by the tens of thousands.
So are you suggesting that we need to be there for the foreseeable future?
We have no strategy. What we can do is contain it. And what we need the Sunni Arabs to participate. We've got to put together a plan to do it. And people are wringing their hands about it because they're concerned that we could wind up in a war with the Iranians. Well, the alternative is the Iranians are going to be able to build a land bridge from Iran through Iraq because their political influence in Iraq is greater than ours, into Syria, all the way to Lebanon, to the Mediterranean. They want a port on the Mediterranean in Lebanon. That's their proxies who are in Lebanon. They run the country of Lebanon, the Hezbollah. They have a huge strategy in the region to dominate and influence the Middle East. And the president has a strategy now to push back on it, but we don't have one yet for Syria.
Very important. General Jack Keane, as always, thank you very much, sir. Good to see you tonight.
Good talking to you, Martha.
You too. Coming up next.
We're in the midst of the deadliest drug epidemic this country has ever seen.
And a stunning report says Trump's former drug czar nominee, who just bowed out under a cloud of controversy, may have contributed to this crisis. Bill Bennett was our nation's very first drug czar. And he says D.C. is knocking on his door for the job. Coming up next, we will talk about that. Plus, the security guard at the center for those crucial moments before the Vegas shooter opened fire is speaking out for the first time. What he says happened in the minutes before the nation's worst shooting. And as the NFL comes to a consensus on the anthem debate, Colin Kaepernick's attorney now claims that he has smoking gun evidence that team owners colluded against his client. Really? Governor Mike Huckabee weighs in on that. Coming up next.
We believe that our players should stand for the national anthem. That's an important part of our game and our moments, and we believe in that.
We're in the midst of the deadliest drug epidemic this country has ever seen. We've seen nothing like it. higher availability of drugs, lower prices, increased purity, along with the deadly substance fentanyl, have resulted in climbing death tolls across this country.
Very strong words today from the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, on the opioid crisis that really is gripping this country. And that comes days after an exclusive report revealed that President Trump's nominee for drug czar, Pennsylvania Congressman Tom Marino, had sponsored a bill that, according to the 60 Minutes report, allowed the drug industry to use money and influence to push millions of pills to these pain centers and clinics that have popped up across America. He decided to withdraw his name from consideration. He said he did not want to be a distraction, but the shockwaves of all of this are still rippling across Washington. Listen.
If I was going to write a book about how to harm the United States with pharmaceuticals, the only thing I can think of that would immediately harm is to take the authority away from the investigative agency that is trying to enforce the Controlled Substances Act and the regulations implemented under the Act. And that's what this bill did.
Unreal. Bill Bennett was the nation's very first drug czar, and he now hosts the Bill Bennett Show podcast. He's also a Fox News contributor and a frequent guest of ours here on The Story. It's good to see you tonight, Bill. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Martha.
I mean, there's so many levels of how shocking this story is. You've got, last year, 51,000 people died. The projection for 2017 is 71,000. I know two people who lost sons, a son and a nephew. I don't think anybody in America has not been touched by this bill.
Right. This is arguably the deadliest criminal enterprise in the history of the United States. And I say criminal enterprise. I know all the fuss has been over the last week or so about pill mills, and there are pill mills, and there have been pill mills, and there was overprescribing, but that is not the nature of the hardest part of the problem now. The hardest part of the problem now, and the most prevalent part of the problem, and the part that is killing the most people, is the availability of illegal drugs, not legal drugs diverted, but illegal drugs, fentanyl and heroin. And it's killing people at those rates, many more than all the names that we see at the Vietnam Memorial. And we have got to get on this in a very serious way.
You know, it feels like a lot of people are saying that, but I don't know how real the war against this is. And you fought a war on drugs as the first drug czar of America. What's your advice to the next drug czar? And, you know, I guess there's potential that your name is even on that list as well again.
No, I have people write and ask me, but no, that's not a job for me, not anymore. But there are several people, I have names that I'm passing on. But I think whoever gets the job can do something. Do what we did. I don't mean me particularly, but the whole country, what we did then. I heard a Fox contributor just a couple hours ago say the war on drugs was a failure. It was not, it was not, it was not. From 1979 to 1992, Martha, we got illegal drug use down in this country by more than 50%. This was a function of advertising. You remember the drugs off the diving board into an empty swimming pool, fried eggs on drugs. Local law enforcement, teachers, ministers, priests, rabbis, advocacy from the federal government, what President Bush did. We took this thing to the bad guys in South America, and we worked on all fronts. And because of that, we got this problem down. Now, if you get any problem down, teenage pregnancy, homelessness, desertion by more than 50%, I don't think you call it a failure, and it can be done again. But we have to recognize the problem for what it is.
I mean, that, you know, heroin across the border, fentanyl is as you point out, a very serious problem. But I don't agree with you that there isn't still a problem with prescriptions, because you can have very minor surgery. You can have your wisdom teeth taken out, like my daughter did, and get sent home with a bottle of these things, 30 of them in a bottle, you know, to a 20-year-old. I think that's insane. I mean, you know, try Advil, and if you really have a problem, give us a call, and maybe we'll give you one or two of these. But there is absolutely a flood of these painkillers in the market, and they're sitting around in people's homes, and people are getting their hands on them, and that's the route that many people take that then leads to heroin.
It may have been the original cause, and there is still too much out there. That's what parents are for. That's what you're there for. And they overdiagnose or overprescribe, you've got to act. And that is still going on. I don't deny that. But that is not the bulk of the problem. Take a look at the medical examiner reports, the death reports by state, and see what the cause of death is. And you will see it's not for the most part anymore. It is still some. Yes, you're right, Martha, the diversion of legal drugs. It is for the most part these illegal drugs. There's no reason we can't get after all of this problem at once. We can get after the places that are distributing too many of these pills, and we can get after the Chinese and the Mexicans and the people who are sending this stuff in.
Well,
but we've got to be serious. We were serious in 89, 90, 91. We pushed back. When this country pushes back and is serious, it's very hard to stop.
Well, when you've got optometrists who can dispense painkillers like this, and when all they're doing is reading an eye chart, and that happens in 10 states in this country, there's a lot of levels to this problem to talk about, and you've touched on so many of them. Bill, as always, it's good to see you tonight. Come back and talk about it more with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
As always, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You too. All right, coming up next here, the Vegas security guard who we have spoken about so much in terms of this story has finally been found. He surfaced, and he's speaking out.
I went to go lift my pant leg up, and I saw the blood. That's when I called it in on my radio that shots have been fired.
That is Jesus Campos, who was in that hallway on October 1. What he says happened, and he leaves more questions still on the table than answers. Former LAPD detective Mark Furman and CIA-trained intel operative Tony Shaffer with how they look at the latest evidence in this case. And as new details break by the hour on the Harvey Weinstein sex scandal, a look at how this isn't just a Hollywood problem anymore. It has spread to city councils, gymnasts, actresses, all across the board. That when we come back.
There will be zero tolerance for unconscionable behavior, for abuse of power to not only women, but to men as well in our industry and others.
Developing tonight, we are finally hearing from the Mandalay Bay security guard believed to be the first person to encounter Las Vegas gunman Stephen Paddock. Jesus Campos kind of disappeared for a few days after he had committed to do a series of network interviews, including one with our own Sean Hannity. But his story now is at the center of the changing timeline of that October 1st night, and whether he or the hotel called police after he was shot and 6 minutes before Paddock opened fire on the concert. Here is what Campos told Ellen DeGeneres today.
And at that time, I heard what I assumed it was drilling sounds. And I believed that they were in the area working somehow.
So you thought the drilling, they were gunshots, but you thought it was just drilling sounds?
At first, I think it was just drilling sounds.
Right.
As that door's closing and it's so heavy, it'll slam. I'm walking down this way, and I believe that's what caught the shooter's attention. As I was walking down, I heard rapid fire, and at first I took cover. I felt a burning sensation. I went to go lift my pant leg up, and I saw the blood. That's when I called it in on my radio that shots have been fired. And I was gonna say that I was hit, but I got all over my cell phone just to clear that radio traffic they can coordinate the rest of the call.
So he shot, you didn't even know, he shot through this door, right?
Yeah, from behind the door. I didn't know how he was shooting, but he shot out.
Mark Furman, former LAPD detective and a Fox News contributor. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer is a CIA-trained intel operative. Good to have both of you with us tonight. And, you know, Jose Campos obviously has been central to this story. He was the first person, according to the story, to take fire from Stephen Paddock. And Tony, just first of all, your reaction as you listen to him tell that story.
Well, look, it's very clearly he's emotionally distraught. He's been through a lot. And I don't want to say anything derogatory regarding his recall. My question primarily focuses on the reaction after he was shot. You know, I would defer to Mark on this, but Look, most places I know, if you have shots fired, the police department responds within minutes, especially in a place where, Vegas, where you have a large amount of crime that people are having to deal with constantly. So I really do question what happened in those moments after he was shot. Why wasn't that called in?
Yeah.
And it took, you know, I'm familiar with breaching operations. I'm familiar with counter battery fire, looking at where fire is coming from. But Martha, had this information been passed to the appropriate people during the time of the shooting, things could have been done to either lay down suppressive fire on the sniper's nest or hasten the breaching operation going into the room. We have to remember the SWAT guys didn't go in for, to my recall, about an hour after the initial shooting started. So there's some real questions here about timelines.
Mark, what do you think?
Well, you know, when I watch this video, I see that Mr. Campos is rather humble, maybe a little unsophisticated. He's a security guard, but we don't know his level of training before, during, or after this incident. So when you hear... When you hear him describe this incident, I agree with the colonel that once somebody is hit, it should have been shots fired, I'm hit, or man down, and that would have accelerated the emergency, the 911 call. Perhaps police would have got there quicker, but I doubt it. They had a pretty good response time, the first 6 officers. By the time the SWAT team got there, the shooting had stopped on the crowd, so then they had a barricaded situation. So 17 minutes, it was a barricaded situation. So that's understandable. Yeah. But I do agree that there was a lapse, a small lapse of time, or maybe intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, when he's talking about making that phone call, he says, I radioed, you know, so I guess he radios to MGM, to the, you know, people in charge there. You know, that's one of the things that we really still haven't mapped out, exactly when the 911 call was transferred to the police and when all of the police got an all-points bulletin identifying that he was clearly on the 32nd floor. But one of the questions that I want to get to real quick before we have to go, Tony, is you really want to see those videos, because there are cameras all over this place and we haven't seen anything.
Martha, I mean, the guy was there for days, and we've seen NFL players convicted over beating up their girlfriends in elevators, but we can't see one video of this guy. Yeah. There's some really very strange things dangling. Remember, everybody's kind of lost track of the $100,000 he sent to the Philippines, and we've seen these comments from the sheriff that nobody's followed up on, like the comment about radicalization, the comment on motive. He says we have no definitive motive. It doesn't say we have no clear evidence, but there is something there. So what is it they don't want to talk about? That's bothering a lot of people.
I think they've clammed up because they felt like the timeline discrepancy didn't work in their favor. I got to leave it there, you guys. Thank you so much, Mark and Tony. Good to see you.
Thank you.
So still to come tonight, LeBron James brings the anthem crisis to the highest level of basketball now as the Cavs link arms, and he has a message on his sneakers for everybody. Governor Mike Huckabee joins me on that. Plus, as more accusers come forward in the Harvey Weinstein scandal, is there no end to this? More women obviously feeling empowered to tell their story and their experiences from all walks of life across the country. We're going to talk to one of them next. That is the number of people now accusing Harvey Weinstein of sexual misconduct. And as more come forward, it's empowering others to speak out about a problem that is not just in Hollywood, although it's pretty bad there. It appears it is in almost every company in town across the country. Trace Gallagher, live in our West Coast newsroom with that part of this story tonight. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. When the New York Times broke the story laying out decades of sexual harassment allegations against Harvey Weinstein, the movie producer apologized for some misdeeds, denied others, and threatened to sue the Times. But within days, dozens of more allegations surfaced, including from A-list actresses like Angelina Jolie and Gwyneth Paltrow. Weinstein was then dismissed by his company's board of directors, kicked out of the Motion Picture Academy, and left by his wife. The floodgates had opened, and it wasn't just Harvey Weinstein. Social media was now replete with stories of assault. Actress Alyssa Milano tweeted, quote, "If all the women who have been sexually harassed or assaulted wrote Me Too as a status, we might give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem. With that, Me Too became a rallying cry to stand against sexual misconduct." One of the Me Too messages came from Olympic gold medal gymnast MacCallum, who claims that beginning at age 13, she was molested by Dr. Lawrence Nasser, the former team doctor for the U.S. women's gymnastic team. Nasser is in jail facing 22 molestation counts involving at least 7 other gymnasts. Maroney posted, quote, "People should know that this is not just happening in Hollywood. This is happening everywhere." And because of the groundswell, Issa Hackett, the producer of Amazon's Man in the High Castle, says she was inspired to make a public accusation against Amazon Studios head Roy Price. 5 days after the accusation, Roy Price resigned. Finally, in California's democratically controlled state capital, the cry of Me Too became Us Too, when 140 women, including lawmakers, lobbyists, and Capitol staff from both parties, signed a letter calling out the pervasive culture of sexual harassment that plagues their industry. The letter states in part, quote, "Why didn't we speak up? Sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of shame. Often these men hold our professional fates in their hands. Our relationships with them are crucial to our personal success, and it is not just in the U.S. Me Too stories have inundated the internet from all around the globe. Martha.
Incredible. Trace, thank you very much. So here now with more, Leslie Marshall, syndicated talk show radio host, and Katie Pavlich is townhall.com news editor. Both are Fox News contributors. Welcome. Good to have both of you with us tonight. You know, I mean, it is astounding when you look at these numbers and you look at these hashtag Me Too's, Leslie, and you too, I guess, is the way to bring that to you, because you have experienced this in your own life as well.
Yes, I have, and I'm glad that they're saying it's not just in Hollywood. It's the casting couch is not just in Hollywood and not just in movies. It can be in radio. It can be in banking. I mean, when you look at this hashtag and you look at the various backgrounds and careers that these women have, for me, 2 of my experiences, one happened in D.C., where a man came to my hotel room at 2 a.m. He was the man I was interviewing with for a job and told me if I let him in the room, I would get the job. I did not, and I did not get the job. And in Boston, when I was fresh out of college, I went to the boss of my boss and said, this man is sexually harassing and I guess borderline assaulting me. And he brought the man in, sat him next to me, asked him, and the 2 of them laughed at how delusional I was. And that's why I think, Martha, so many women have kept their mouths shut for so long. The fear of these powerful individuals who do hold our fate professionally in their hands.
Yeah. You know, Katie, you look at it, really about 40 years since women have been really in the workplace, you know, and you see so much progress, obviously, but there's obviously a lot of disgusting pig guys out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you read these stories, I just, you know, it's so disgusting. And, you know, look at Michaela Maroney, right? Mm-hmm. She says, I had a dream to go to the Olympics, and the things that I had to endure to get there were unnecessary and disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, clearly we're seeing that this is affecting women of all kinds of cultures, all kinds of environments, all kinds of industries. But I don't want to distract away completely from Hollywood being somewhat responsible for the culture that has developed. Hollywood has a very big impact on American culture. They know that they do. And over the course of the past 30 years, they have had a rape culture problem that they have refused to acknowledge. And while they have lectured the rest of the country about misogyny, sexual harassment, sexual assault, they really should have been cleaning up their own neighborhood. And in terms of how we prevent this from happening across the board in every industry, not just in Hollywood, there has to be a sea change of how women are portrayed in pop culture coming directly from Hollywood. When you look around at the people who are directing these films, who are in charge, who are doing the castings from the casting couch, not the people being interviewed, but the people deciding who's going to be in films, it's all about portraying women as sex objects. And until that can change, until women are not objectified as all around our culture, you see it in Times Square, you have women on billboards, you see it coming from Hollywood. That is the main thing. Women are used as sex objects in movies. I'm not so sure we're going to see so much of this changing in the future, unfortunately.
What do you think?
I have to say that I agree with part of what you said, Katie, but it's not just Hollywood. I mean, women, I think since Adam and Eve, it's all about, our hair, our face, our body, our weight. We get this all the time. The three of us being on television tonight, there'll be comments about our physical appearance on social media. It comes from Madison Avenue. It comes from Hollywood, too. But it also comes from our homes. What are the men and women in the families teaching our sons and the men of the future? I think in the past, we have seen a tolerance for this, and there has to be zero tolerance, and this has to begin, quite frankly, at home and by examples of fathers and other in business. But people have to stop looking the other way,
I do
and
have
then
to say,
women will
though,
feel more
I want
comfortable
people to be very
forward.
careful about us generalizing all men being put into the same category as Harvey Weinstein. I mean, I was not raised in a home where Harvey Weinstein's behavior was ever acceptable. It's a minority, even though there are a lot of cases where women are sexually abused and assaulted, and it's inappropriate, it's unacceptable, it has to change. But this idea that all men are bad and we are raised in homes where this is acceptable,
You know what?
I have to reject.
We need to have an hour-long talk about this because we're just scratching the surface, and there's a lot more to say about it. Thank you very much to both of you. Good to see you tonight. So Roger Goodell speaks out today on the anthem battle, and the president, not impressed. You could put him in that category, tweeting, "Too much talk, not enough action. Stand for the national anthem." As Colin Kaepernick's attorney says he has a smoking gun against the NFL. Mike Huckabee joins me on that next.
We believe everyone should stand for the national anthem. That's an important part of our policy. It's also an important part of our game that we all take great pride in. And it's also important for us to honor our flag and to our country, and we think our fans expect us to do that.
So that was NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell earlier today. As you can see, he stopped short of saying that standing for the anthem would be mandatory. It comes less than 24 hours after Colin Kaepernick's attorney suggested that he will be able to prove that NFL owners colluded to keep his client off the field.
I am going to predict right now that we will have a smoking gun. I'm not going to alert who it will be or what it will be, but we have a high degree of confidence that this will be able to be proved and that there are people who are not going to get into a arbitration proceeding and they're not going to lie. They're not going to lie. They're going to tell the truth, and they're going to say what happens is that they were told, no, it's not, you're not going to hire him.
Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas and a Fox News contributor. Governor, well, good to see you tonight. Thanks for coming in. You know, you look at the statement by Roger Goodell today, and the president tweeted, "Too much talk, not enough action. Stand for the national anthem." He did not get what he wanted today from Roger Goodell.
Well, I think the sad thing is that Roger Goodell acted like a parent who says to his child, you really ought to eat your vegetables, but I'm not going to make you, and if you'd rather eat ice cream, go ahead, because there's no consequences. I mean, what kind of a statement was that? It was the most worthless statement he could have made. He'd have been better off just saying, we have no rules, we're totally unable to demand that our players respect the flag and the anthem, and so it's every man for himself. That's basically what he said today. I thought it was pathetic, just pathetic.
So, you know, in terms of what he said about looking for ways for the players to interact with the community, there's discussion about the NFL getting behind legislation to change sentencing guidelines for lower drug offenses and things of that sort. It almost sounds like Roger Goodell is trying to negotiate with these players, you know, that if he will sort of go a bit of the distance towards the things that they care about, perhaps he can get them to stand up for the flag?
Well, when they're on their own time and they're out of uniform and they're not at work, they can do whatever they want. They can take on any cause. They can protest police brutality. They can protest anything they want. Maybe they could go out and protest domestic violence, since there seems to be a higher than normal level of domestic violence within the ranks of the NFL. That might be a good cause to get them involved in. Look, I don't care what they do on their own time, but when they are on the clock of the employer, when they're wearing the uniform of their team.
But they're saying that's the moment that they can have the biggest impact, because that's when everybody is watching them.
Yeah, but is that the proper place for politics? I mean, let's face it, Martha, there's a time and a place for everything. And if they really are that interested in making political statements, I got a real good suggestion for them. Give up their multi-million-dollar-a-year salaries, get on the ballot, run for office, get elected, and affect the change that you're passionate about. I guarantee you won't make that much money, but by golly, that's how you really change
Although
things.
you make more than you used to working for the government. But anyway, do you think that Donald Trump and Colin Kaepernick should get together and sit down and talk? Can you imagine that happening?
Not really. I think it would be rewarding Colin Kaepernick for his, frankly, selfish behavior and sometimes his anti-police actions and comments. And I don't think that kind of behavior should be rewarded. So no, I don't think the President of the United States should somehow cater to somebody who has acted in such a recklessly irresponsible way that put his entire league in a terrible position and is costing the players, is costing his colleagues. And here's the thing, it's costing retired NFL players money because their retirement money is based.
So finally tonight, controversial comedian Chelsea Handler has made a rather strange announcement tonight on Facebook, and it's our quote of the night. She said, like so many across the country, the past presidential election and countless events that have unfolded have galvanized me. For these reasons, I've decided not to return for another season of Chelsea and instead devote as much time as I can to becoming more knowledgeable and engaged citizen and focus on projects that are significant. My goal is to be better informed, to raise my voice and participate in a more meaningful way. She wants to travel across the country, she says, and visit areas and people that I don't know enough about, speak to colleges and listen to students and get a better understanding of our political divide. Handler's talk show had struggled. It was switched from a daily show to a weekly show in its second season and never really broke out in late night. So tell me what you think about that. Will you miss that? Tweet me at Martha MacCallum. Thanks for sharing our story tonight. Good to have you here as always. We will be right back here tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Tucker Carlson is up next.